Well, to discuss, we're joined by the former Statistician General, who is now a consultant to the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, Pali Lehohla, joining us. Thank you so much for being with us, Mr. Lehohla. So many people couldn't believe their ears today when they heard that the actual percentage of unemployed had gone down. We've explained why, people just simply not looking for work under lockdown. And there was also, of course, a very different way of collecting data under the lockdown because it had to be done virtually, telephonically. Do you believe that the stats presented today overall are good ones, are accurate?
Well, when I was Statistician General, I didn't know anything about numbers being good or being bad. I understood methods being right. And the Statistician General has done well to sticking to the methods and ensuring that he delays the release of the numbers until he has clarified for himself that the methods are sound. So from a methodological point of view, I'm happy about what he has done. As an ordinary citizen, I'm actually not very happy about the high levels of unemployment. Of course, the number 23% is true based on the methods. And of course, one has to look at the higher number of 42% because in terms of the definitions of who is unemployed, you've got to be there looking for a job in the last 7 days, actively looking for a job. And of course, under hard lockdown, you couldn't look for a job. Because you wouldn't move around looking for the job. Of course, you could apply, but the offices were closed. So there wasn't a possibility of active behavior of looking for a job. But you can't guess that people were not looking for a job and then impute that then the level of unemployment would be any other thing than 23%. I think they've done well as well to, look at methods of collection of data. They've imputed and calculated for that bias and corrected for any bias of non-response that would have occurred because of non-contacts in the information. So the 23% unemployment is the correct number, but we also know there is a number that says 2.2 million people lost their jobs, and that 2.2 million is significant. It falls on top of the already number that was 6 million of people that didn't have jobs. So the number of people without jobs has risen significantly, or rather 8 million. And then if you add that to the already expanded definition, which was 10 million, we are probably at 12 million people without jobs in South Africa at the moment. The situation is dire.
It's an incredibly sad situation. I think you can explain something to us. Why do we look at that headline figure of 23% rather than the expanded definition, which you mentioned, 42%, which includes people who have given up looking for work? The fact is that they don't have a job. Many would say that is the real picture, 42%.
Well, you wouldn't like to midstream change definitions in order to suit specific situations. You got to stick to the definitions. And of course, the Statistician General has also explained that situation, that there are 2.2 million people who lost jobs. In fact, the document that provides this information is very rich. It gives you participation rates. It gives you absorption rates. And from all that, you can understand fully what the impact of COVID-19 lockdown and what the challenge going forward is going to be around how we can actually create jobs and get out of this, given the value chains that have been broken, given the closure of businesses that we know have closed down. So this information, this document is very, very rich. I don't think we should be hung up on the on the top number of 23%. We've got to go deeper into sectors of the economy. We've got to go deeper into which areas of the country have lost in terms of provinces. Some numbers are actually relevant for metros because the sample size is quite big. And I think I would implore policy to look deeper into the numbers rather than just look the headline unemployment number, just as they did with the GDP number. That was seasonally adjusted, annualized, and giving 51%. And everybody focused on the 51% instead of looking at what was actually happening in the economy.
Well, if we look at what is actually happening here, let's look at the demographics. And you've raised this concern before, that unemployment amongst Black South Africans is higher than any other population group. If we look at today's stats, Black women, particularly vulnerable there, the unemployment rate above 28%. How do you think this is possible? I mean, 2.5 decades or more into democracy, BEE, other interventions that don't seem to be working.
Well, I think we realize just like frogs, you warm it and you kill it until it boils without realizing that the water was heating up. Only when there's corona, we start jumping, but actually we are cooked already. So there has been a long period of time where we didn't actually attend to the policies that we are actually using. The policies that we have introduced and implemented have created levels of unemployment that are untold. And I think as the discussions at NADLEC take place, we need to know what the targets for employment will be and what the targets of unemployment will be. We need to know what the growth targets will be. And we need a roadmap that ensures that those targets are met. We need civil society in the space. More recently, the SABC led a civil society manifesto. And the civil society say we need credit in order to actually go into business. And that is a macroeconomic policy which has to be tempered to extend credit. If we don't extend credit to the poor, to business and so on, then we are not likely to get out of this space. And until we touch that macroeconomic, where we have been saying the fundamentals are firm, they are not. You cannot have high unemployment of 30% and have debt to GDP ratio of about 40% and inflation targeting of 4% and say your macroeconomic fundamentals are secure. They are not. It can't be that 30% is an equilibrium that we must accept jointly with the debt to GDP ratio of 40% and the inflation targeting of 4%. There's something fundamentally wrong around that there's nobody who speaks for unemployment. Yet unemployment is part of the macroeconomic framework. It's a basic economic theory. And if we don't go into those kinds of things and leave those to have no spokesperson, then that will yield something that will be worse than what we have now.
Yeah. Well, let's see if policymakers are listening about your call for a definite targets, because we're waiting for that economic recovery plan that we know that has gone through.
Well, I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy about the targets that business put. For the first time, business has committed to some targets. Now is the time to put their hands to the fire. We can't accept targets and not put their hands to the fire. They must demonstrate how those targets are going to be met. And there must be a roadmap that is proven ahead of time, because a plan is something that has proof of concept ahead of time. The targets are about 15% unemployment rate, which is quite good. It's about 5% growth, which is quite good. It's a debt to GDP ratio of about 43%, or rather 60%. And they also have a target of inequality of 0.43 Gini. Those are good targets. And if business must commit to that, we throw away the key and say those targets are locked in and those are the targets that we must meet. Government must stick to those targets, and they should only bring that key out when those targets are bettered.
I think we need to discuss this further, but we're running out of time. I just want you quickly to explain your recent concerns about other data in South Africa, not today's unemployment data, but other data that is not being collected. Very quickly, please.
Yes, indeed. I mean, it's part of the destruction of the infrastructure. If you cannot run an income and expenditure survey for 10 years when it has to be done every 5 years, then your CPI is not trustworthy. Your GDP is not trustworthy. Your debt to GDP ratio cannot be trustworthy. Your inflation target cannot be trustworthy. So we cannot be saying we are serious about those targets of inflation targeting and debt to GDP ratio, when we have actually corroded the basic infrastructure for collecting that data. That's a disservice to a National Statistics Office, just as the rail lines are being ripped off, just as the electricity lines are being ripped off, just as the roads are being dug, just as corruption is that infrastructure is part and parcel of the corruption project of undermining the capacity of the state to deliver.
All right, thank you very much for your time tonight. That was the former Statistician General, Pali Lehohla, right now an associate of Oxford University.